Hi everyone, I'm Amanda Sharp and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on how to make money with Azure. Today we will be hearing from Matt Missy and Levi Gibson. All lines have been muted. I'll be monitoring the chat and QA features throughout the webcast and will address your questions at the end. This webcast is being recorded and will be posted on the training page on the internet under the Teams tab. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to Matt.
Hello everyone, good morning. My name is Matt Missy. I am the leader of the public cloud practice. And so we're going to go through today talking about how we make money with Azure. But before we do that, wanted to just update everyone on where we're at on our public cloud enablement series. So if you recall, back in September, we discussed our public cloud strategy. It was a webcast, so you can go back and it's recorded and go back and review that. Today we're talking about, again, making money with Azure. We have another webcast coming up next week that I'll be presenting on around Azure 101, Public Cloud 101. So make sure to attend that, spread the word on that one. That'll be a good session. And then in January, on January 9th, we will have a webcast around public cloud sales engagement. And we'll walk through just a high-level kind of sales scenario. We're going to actually have someone on from Microsoft. His name is Nick Johnson. He is our partner technology strategist. He'll be on that call, and we'll do some role play, and then leave the bulk of the call to questions or comments and discuss and talk through how we engage around these public cloud opportunities, and in particular around Azure. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Levi. And so again, just recapping where we're at, gone through the webinars, we're enabling folks through various training with Pluralsight. So if you recall back to the webinar that we did back in September, we talked about enabling from a 100, 200, 300, and 400 level perspective. So that has now been made available. We've actually made an investment in Pluralsight training where folks can go out and actually go through the 200 and 300 level training. It's several hours worth of training, but folks should already be started on that and focusing again on those specific courses around Azure. We have currently 124 architects and engineers going through that particular training, so that way as we engage out in the field with Microsoft, with our customers, they can see the depth and breadth of expertise that we have out there. And then also soon you're going to see more information coming out around the public cloud sales resources that are going to be available on the intranet. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Levi. Levi is going to walk us through how we monetize Azure, you know, and what that looks like, what those various scenarios look like. So Levi, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt, and thanks, Amanda, for kicking us off. So as Matt said, I am Levi Gibson. I sit on the product management department at Insight. So for those of you who aren't familiar with that org, I actually report into Paul Earhart, who you've heard from on our last webcast, but product management is kind of what I call a catch-all department for the alliance relationship. So our PM team at Insight really holds that relationship with vendors to help drive the business through co-selling and through alliance plays. So Microsoft is large enough that what we see is a lot of the different teams and departments at Insight and DataLink are connected to their appropriate Microsoft contacts. But we help really from that alliance management, help with the different rebates, help manage the products when there's changes or updates or different licensing. But how it relates to today and everyone on this call is that I help support Microsoft Azure and our Azure Go Big initiative, which is supporting Matt as the public cloud leader for the solutions that back into our Azure products. So if all you remember is that Levi Gibson is the crazy Microsoft guy, that's fine too. You're always welcome to throw something on my calendar for a quick catch-up. I'd love to meet with you and learn a bit about what you do as well. And if you ever have trouble navigating the Microsoft environment, getting answers or finding out just what resources are available, you could always start with me and I'm happy to help you navigate what our business is. So on today's call, it's all going to be about money, which, you know, we all like to hear about. So I'm going to talk through kind of the different ways Microsoft Azure is sold, talk through the ways we make money on Azure, which leads directly into Digital Partner of Record, or DPOR, as everyone on this call has been hearing a lot about. I'm excited to give more information on it. And then I'm going to go through some examples of services engagement that leads to GP from a product perspective. And then at the end of the call, I'll turn it back over to Matt before we end. So getting us started, let's talk about the software side of the business. So everyone on this call knows services and knows data center really well, but let's talk about how Microsoft Azure is sold. So when we look from a licensing perspective, there are 3 ways customers can purchase Microsoft licensing. With Azure today, the first one is an enterprise agreement, or EA. Now, you're going to hear about this most often because it's common around the mid-market customers all the way up through enterprise and majors. So an EA agreement really gives the customers the benefit of scale. So they get discount pricing based on their commitment over 3 years, and it allows them to break their bill down into 3 annual payments. So, you know, for larger customers, it's a great way to kind of lock in their licensing solution and get discounts. The other thing I'll say about this is a lot of EA agreements have Microsoft very close in the sale, meaning that we're going out as our account managers and Microsoft's going out with their account managers together and supporting the customer, but it's all led through and with a partner. So all of those EA agreements are being managed by some reseller or partner out there. Now, the second licensing type is newer, just a couple years old, but growing very fast, and that's called our cloud solution provider, or you'll hear to it as the CSP type licensing. And I always think of CSP as kind of like the Uber of Microsoft licensing. All you're doing is paying for what you use when you use it from Microsoft Cloud. So we see customers are able to deploy Azure or even Office 365 and scale up and down by usage by month. So this gets really sticky in those SMB spaces and the lower to mid enterprise where they need that flexibility, the very quick reactions, but it comes without those, you know, scale discounts that we see at EA. The best value we can find in CSP is when we're able to bundle it with our managed or consulting services. So as I mentioned, that it's kind of like the Uber of licensing. What we see a lot is that partners will take their managed services and vary the cost of the licensing of CSP right into their monthly bill, which makes it a really great CapEx cost for the customer. And with CSP, it's all through partner as well. And the third way is Microsoft Direct, just through the Azure.com website. And I'll just want to hit on this because it's out there and customers can do it. But what I'll say is that Microsoft supports the transition of any of those transacts to a partner. So Microsoft is a partner-first company, and what they want to do and what they want to see is that the partners are involved in helping influence that customer to make it more sticky. So the takeaway of this slide is that, you know, Microsoft is partner-led. So anytime a customer is using Microsoft, there's going to be a partner involved, or Microsoft wants a partner involved. So when that relates to our services agreements, anytime we're deploying anything in public cloud or that influences Microsoft software, we have to be engaged from the licensing side, because if we're not, there's going to be another partner. Okay, so on Azure, how do we earn? Now we know how it's licensed. How do we actually earn? So the obvious side is our services. So what you guys go out and do for us on a day-to-day basis, those services engagements drive GP for us and get us really sticky into accounts. But as those lead into the licensing and product sell is where we really start to see more and more profitability come in. We deploy a service. If we can capture that license transact as well, we get the commissions, fees, and rebates from that product sell. But that also leads us into consumption incentives. So consumption incentives are a way that Microsoft pays us as the partner on an ongoing basis for bringing that business to them, and they pay us more as we influence more. So what does that mean? That means that with consumption incentives, or as what we'll talk about in a minute, digital partner of record, the more we influence, the more we earn. So when we're able to take that product sale with the licensing and pair it with our services, what happens is the consumption incentives we receive double. We actually go from 10% to 20%. Now there's other benefits to kind of influencing that services and product as well. When we get DPORs, we actually start getting visibility into customer subscriptions and their usage. But what it really does is drives up our profitability, and then with access to their subscriptions, we actually can see more strategic ways to cross-sell and go back into those accounts. Okay, so that's great. Consumption incentives, that sounds awesome. That sounds profitable. It sounds like we can get more services into the account with it, but what is it and what do we need to do? So digital partner of record is what we call it when Microsoft actually registers as the services partner. So you're familiar now with the licensing side of it, where we get to be the partner that transacts and sells the license. But when we become that and the partner that implements a service, Microsoft actually allows us to be listed on the subscription along with the customer. And that just shows from a Microsoft perspective, that shows, hey, we influenced this deal, we added value, and we helped the customer stand up to drive more cloud. And that's when it starts to get sticky. So what are these rebates? So when we look on the profitability levers of Microsoft, what I want to do is first start with this very first column here. So this is probably what you guys as the data link folks are probably most unfamiliar with, and that's a licensing or a product resell on itself. So this would be in cases like an old LSP model where we just transact the software and don't add value with our services. Now, when we do that, we still get rebate, we still get commission, but it's capped, and it's capped at the 4% of the Azure bill, plus we get 10% of their growth each quarter. But on your guys' side, when we're able to do the licensing and product resell and add that DPOR, because we have the service, that's where we start to add a 7% consumption rate onto that 4%. So it drives us up, as well as 20% on the all-up growth. So with DPOR, our rebates actually over double. Now with the CSP program, as I mentioned earlier, that's bundled into managed and consulting services, those start to pay on a different rebate scale, but they go from 10 to 20% all up on front-end GP. So that's really profitable as well. So, okay, I get it. I'm showing you all these numbers, but you're thinking, Levi, you're crazy. We're not accountants. What does this really mean? Well, that's a great question. Okay, so here's some examples that I wanted to walk you through. So on this slide, it shows some examples of small, medium, large, and extra large companies who've deployed a service with us that stood up an Azure product on the back end of the cloud service. So when you look on the bottom of the slide, that second pink header, that's where you see the services GP that we actually stood up. And let's go over that first. Let's hone in on the medium deal example in this. So a medium customer, let's say our average service engagement in there, depending on what we do, falls at 35 to 100K, 35% GP. We're going to collect on average 20K GP from that deal. Now, 20K GP, that's great. But now when we look up under that top header, under the product related GP for that medium deal size, let's look at what we can get when we influence the licensing transact on that business too. So on this size customer, we would stand them up with an enterprise agreement, that EA we talked about earlier, at $250,000 a year commit to Azure. Now again, I mentioned this before, but on an EA agreement, what the customer does is they commit on an annual basis for 3 years at a time. So this customer committed to $250,000 in Azure. So we're going to get the 4% GP just from that sell, but below that, here's where it gets better. We get that $200,000 a year on DPOR incentive at 7% plus the 20% quarter over quarter growth. So that's going to bring us to another 14K. So when we get the 10,000 from Transact plus the $14,000 consumption incentive, that brings $24,000 in GP into the deal. So we've over doubled what we could do with just services alone. So that's a great example. The other thing I'll say on this slide is we talk about small, medium, large, and extra large deals when it comes to Microsoft Azure, but that's different than the size of our actual customer. So for example, we don't think in size of the number of employees or the total revenue of a company. It's really about where they're at on their cloud journey. We could have a very large enterprise customer who isn't ready to go to cloud and is just dipping their toe with some hybrid storage. And so they may fall more into a smaller medium deal when it comes to the scope of public cloud, where a smaller, few employee ISV who does everything in the cloud may be our larger, extra large customer. So when you're thinking about deal size and how it could be profitable, all you're doing is bringing up where are you at in your public cloud journey to your customers, and that's going to help you really gauge the size of the opportunity instead of looking into the size of their company. So let's look at the extra large deal example now. So what we went through before with the different rebate levers on Azure, we know some of those start to cap at a certain amount. So let's look at the big boy deal up here at extra large. So we're going to define this roughly as someone with over $10 million a year in Azure consumption. Now I know that sounds huge, that sounds like a ton, but we know these deals are out there in the market. They come up to us and surface, just about every week. There's things like Chevron, McDonald's, Costco. These deals are out there, these deals are real, and we're feeling them and seeing them on a day-to-day basis. So on this deal, let's again start down at services. We engage with a great service project that's going to bring us in $175,000 or more of GP. But when we look at that program and consumption rate that we're getting under the product, we're going to cap out and basically top end those levers of rebates at $200,000 for the product sale. But then we're not going to be capped on the consumption. So we're going to add $300,000 of GP just on the licensing and consumption incentives alone. So again, even though on these huge deals where we start to cap out our incentives, we're still at a lot of times doubling what we can do on GP. So again, very profitable. We just want to bring in our software licensing specialists to really help us capture that software business. Okay, so now let's walk through a real example. Let's make this real to what Data Link can do. So in this walkthrough of services, let's set the stage of three things going on. So this is a medium-sized company. And again, we're defining medium-sized by their public cloud journey and not the size of the company itself. So they brought Data Link in. They want to do an assessment of 200 applications to see where they can be out on cloud. From that assessment, we help them define that 90 applications can move to Microsoft Azure, and they engage us for those services as well. And then because during our initial cloud assessment with this customer, we brought in our software sales specialists, we were able to capture that enterprise agreement. So in phase one here, let's start out and see. So when we look down at the services, we started that service engagement of $150,000 for the assessment of those applications. But then we also kicked off the migration services of those 90 applications, and we started that. Our software specialists that we brought into the services deal really made the customer happy. They signed their enterprise agreement with us for a commit of $250,000 a year of Azure. So just in that phase one of working through starting the services and getting about midway into the migration, we're already at just under $80,000 of GP. So phase two, here's where the different levers really start coming into play. You can see under the services engagement, we're still engaging and doing some of those migrations of the 90 applications to Azure. But what you'll see in the kind of the middle section of this chart is that although the customer's already paid their commit to Microsoft, the customer's done paying for their licensing for a while, now that they're ramping up, they're starting to consume $75,000 of Azure, of which we're going to get that 4% kind of rebate on, as well as the 7% on DPOR in their growth. And during the first phase of when a customer is implementing Azure, that's when it's really cool for us, right? Because they're starting from zero on that subscription, so everything on it is growth. So we're getting that 20% on everything. Now in phase three, you'll see we're still engaging, finishing up that migration of the 90 applications. Now they're still ramping up their Azure. They're up to 150,000. And the other thing I'll note is you're seeing that on these enterprise agreements, they commit, and at the beginning of the year, their first year, they make their first annual payment. So they've committed to 250,000. But we see, and it's normal for them to take a few months, a couple quarters even, to get ramped up to consuming. And that's in part for on their side as they stand things up, and on our side as we finish out our services, we know it's a journey to get them at full capacity in cloud. Phase four, so after we finish our 90 application migration, what we see is in phase 4, they actually went over their commit of $250,000. So they have a true up on their licensing where they pay more. And we see this a lot too. In a lot of ways, it helps protect the customer. So they committed to what they thought they would use, but they didn't overcommit at the beginning. Midway through the project, we help them assess where they're at, keep them safe with Microsoft licensing, and do a true up with them. And now you can see our services engagement is over, but we're still gaining over $22,000 in GP just from those consumption incentives. So very profitable, on this engagement. As we finished up, we collected $160,000 in services GP for what DataLink implemented, but we did over $100,000 in just the licensing GP alone. So again, the takeaway here is when you're working on these awesome services engagements, when you're doing what DataLink does best and out there talking about data center with your customers, just bring in your software sales specialist. They're going to help you navigate, the insane world of Microsoft software, but that's what they do and that's what they love. Cool. So who are these people and who do I engage? So your software specialty sales team, this is a team up out of Spokane, Washington. They live and breathe software. They sit in our broader software annuities org, so they manage the renewals and licensing of software company-wide for Insight. This team up there, they specialize on the Microsoft side. They're really reactive. The team has a very low turnover. They've all been around Microsoft software for a long time. So these are your contacts that you're going to want to engage. And I would say, I would suggest, of course, bring them in opportunistically when you have services deals that you want to kind of scratch and sniff for a licensing opportunity, bring them in. But don't be afraid to reach out to these folks and just kind of get on a bi-weekly cadence to review pipe, to learn about what's new in licensing, talk to them about what you're doing, and really define how you guys can kind of work together on it. And the other thing I'll say, sorry I missed this guys, but on digital partner of record, so we talked about DPOR, there's a couple things coming up with it. The first is, at the end of this webcast when we send it out, we actually now have a DPOR guide for DataLink. And this guide talks you through, again, everything I went over today about, what is DPOR, what the value is to the customer. It has a lot of opening questions you guys can use to bring it up in accounts. It also goes through how to actually assign us on a customer subscription as a digital partner of record. But if at any time you're lost on DPOR or feel like you need to bring someone else in to open that conversation or to help the customer see the benefits or actually physically get us listed in their subscription, we have an alias, Microsoft Azure at Insight.com, that's led by Billy Roberts on our Insight team. He's technical pre-sales for Microsoft Cloud. Awesome team, phenomenal. So you can engage them at any time. Or again, if you guys forget all that and just remember, hey, Levi Gibson, that crazy Microsoft guy, you can start with me and I'll help you get connected as well. So the last thing I want to hit on, just a housekeeping item before I turn it back over to Matt, is Microsoft funding. So for those of you out, engaged in services, a couple things may come up. So if you're talking to Microsoft account managers, or have had a customer talk to them, you may hear about these programs that offer Microsoft funding. Sometimes they're to the client themselves, sometimes they're back to the partner, but they're out there in the marketplace. If you hear about them, a couple things to remember. One is that Insight is opted into all of them. So as Insight, we're a tier 1 partner for Microsoft, so we're approved and can run with any of these incentives. So if they come up, just remember we have access to them. The other side is, you don't have to be an expert in all of them. There's different funds like, we call them ESIP and customer. These programs are really meant to release the burden of services migrations or implementations, but you don't have to be an expert. All you have to do is be properly engaged with your public cloud pre-sales team, and they're the experts on it. So pretty simple. If you hear about funding in the marketplace, know it's available to us. You don't have to be an expert, just engage your pre-sales team. Awesome. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Matt Missy to kind of go over, our ask of this and how to make this real into your accounts.
All right, thanks, Levi. Yeah, so if you were on the previous webinar that we had back in September, you're going to see that, hey, this really isn't that different. What's the ask? What to go after? You know, start by having the conversation. Start by asking, hey, what are you doing around public cloud? What's your strategy? What's your goals? Are you already doing things in public cloud? Just start that conversation, and what you're going to find is that that conversation will just kind of take on a life of its own. You have resources that you can engage, like myself, Levi, Scott Cameron, others that can help to articulate that conversation. So definitely get us involved. What we want to do is we want to drive to a few of these sweet spots with a focus on one of the following solutions, or heck, maybe all the following solutions, right? Because they're all interrelated, and that is, public cloud strategy. That is very strategic. Engage, transform, optimize. Just reiterating what we went through in our last webinar. Engage, transform, optimize. That end-to-end public cloud strategy, starting off with, strategy workshops, driving into either a public cloud readiness assessment or a workload alignment, driving into actual migrations, and then that can launch into, some more quote-unquote mature uses of the cloud around business continuity, disaster recovery inside of the cloud, right? And then from a tactical perspective, we, again, touch on the business continuity, disaster recovery, leveraging, if you've got Veritas customers as an example, leveraging Azure as your second or third tier storage target, for a repository for your backups. Public cloud governance and operations, this one's huge. We keep seeing a lot of opportunities come up around public cloud governance and operations, and often these types of opportunities have come up because a lot of customers have started doing things in public cloud, primarily competitors to Azure or a competitor to Azure. And what they want to do is they want to understand, okay, now I've got an enterprise organizational kind of official approach, to public cloud. We want to leverage some things within Azure because of things like Active Directory, things like I've got SQL, I've got Office 365. That really launches into this public cloud governance and operations type of discussion. So there's a lot of opportunity out there, and we've got the resources that can help navigate those conversations. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Levi. So what's our call to action? So again, start having the conversation around public cloud. When talking about public cloud services, ensure that your licensing contact is engaged, right? Oftentimes, these customers, depending on where they're at in their cycle, there's various aspects that can make public cloud, Azure, very attractive, and here's what I mean. One, they may be in their cycle where they're renewing their enterprise agreements. And so they want to understand, okay, how big of an enterprise agreement, what's my commit that I need to sign on to? Recently, like as in within the last week, Microsoft just released what they called reserve instances. And reserve instances are exactly what they sound like. I can go and I can reserve a specific instance for a virtual machine, in this case, over a particular period of time, and I get a huge discount, 70% off of retail. And then along with that, I can take advantage of things like hybrid cloud benefit, or hybrid use benefit, I should say. And that hybrid use benefit is it knocks more off of that retail price, and Microsoft would claim somewhere like up to 82% off. So there's a lot of opportunities, in making sure that your licensing contact is engaged, because these are conversations that can drive these Azure consumption opportunities, which obviously drive digital partner of record in our services. If you're working in active SOW, let's make sure that Insight is listed as a digital partner of record. There's a lot of customers out there. I think I mentioned this on our last webinar. We had something like 2,400 EA customers, and we're digital partner of record on 32 of them. So there's a ton of opportunity out there. Now, again, to reiterate what Levi said, digital partner of record does require that we execute services against that or those subscriptions. So let's make sure that we're doing that. So with that, Levi, it looks like we've got some time for some questions, and I do see, looks like one question, and I'm not sure you have the answer therefore, but it's Chuck is asking, is there discounting for Azure Government as well?
Hey, Matt. Yeah, thanks for the question. So Azure Government will want to engage our public sector software sales team. They're the ones who can really dive in on the licensing pricing for that. So we can get you hooked up after this call.
Cool. Are there any other questions out there? You know, around this, Levi, this to me makes a lot of sense. There's a huge opportunity around Azure, around digital partner of record, and hey, you know, I don't remember you saying this or not, but you know, this is a book of business that you can build up, you know, with a recurring revenue type of model, an annuity model. So there's a lot of opportunity here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just thinking about, you know, what we collect ongoing, we always have that 4% of the licensing that we'll continue to connect. We'll have when we're DPOR, we'll have that baseline 7% of everything they're consuming by subscription that we'll continue to collect. And then as that customer grows, of course, we get 20% of their Azure growth as well. So it's a great way to, you know, kind of implement your services. And then after the service is up, you're just starting to build this book of annuity business that just keeps paying over time.
Perfect. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I believe that is it from our end. And, you know, if you do think of things or run across things going forward, again, please reach out to myself, reach out to Levi. We'll get those questions answered. Chuck, we'll follow up with you, you know, if you have any additional information or questions rather around, you know, the discounting with Azure Gov. Azure Gov, just to kind of make a statement there, a little bit of a different beast because it is dedicated only to Azure Government or their contractors. You know, those folks can spin up subscriptions there. But there's a huge opportunity there as well. So with that, I think that's all we have.
For sure, yeah. Thanks for jumping on. It was great. Again, just those software contacts, they're the ones who could really help navigate the complexities of licensing. You know, what licensing vehicle is the best? You know, the government question is a great example of how complex licensing can get. You know, some portions of the government operate on standard contracts, others are involved in group community rates, so it just gets so hairy so quick, and our software sales specialists are really the ones that know all of that and can dive into the weeds and get really specific, really surgical and custom by agreement, by client to find the best avenue.
Thank you, Matt and Levi.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda.